The king immortalized in history as Stephen was born in 1097 in Blois, France. His parents were Stephen Henry, Count of Blois, and Adela of Normandy, daughter of William the Conqueror and sister of Henry I. Stephen was sent to the court of his uncle Henry at the age of 10 and established himself as one of the favorites of the king. He received riches and lands. He also had a lucky escape in 1120 when the white ship carrying Henry's heir, William, born 1103, sank in the English Channel, drowning all on board except a butcher of Rouen. If Stephen hadn't had a bout of diarrhea, he would have been on the ship himself. If William had not died, then Stephen would certainly never have been king. King Stephen of England, often called Stephen of Blois, ruled from 1135 to 1154. His predecessor, Henry I of England, had left no male heir, and his nominated successor, his daughter Empress Matilda, was not to the liking of many powerful barons who preferred Stephen, the wealthiest man in England and nephew of Henry I. An on-off civil war ensued over the next decade and a half or so between the two sides, while the English crown lost control of its territory in Normandy, as well as lands to Scotland and the Welsh princes. Stephen was the last of the Norman kings, a line begun by his grandfather William the Conqueror in 1066. Stephen married Matilda of Boulogne sometime in or before 1125. Matilda was the daughter of Eustace III, Count of Boulogne, and Mary of Scotland, daughter of Malcolm III of Scotland and the sister of Henry I's wife. She would be a formidable ally in her husband's fight to keep his crown, both in terms of finances and leadership. Stephen was said to be good-looking, pious, chivalrous, and charming to everyone, even poor people. He would need all of these qualities to rally sufficient support around him in the coming decades. Despite Henry's wishes, many barons did not like the idea of a female ruler or the idea of a member of the House of Anjou as their sovereign, and so they supported their own man, Stephen, Count of Blois, then the richest baron in England. Stephen also had a very decent pedigree as a grandson of William the Conqueror and a nephew of Henry I. Crucially, at the time of the king's death in December 1135, Stephen was the first to arrive in England while Matilda remained in France. Stephen also had the advantage of being a good military leader and control of the royal treasury at Winchester, thanks to his brother Henry being bishop there since 1129. Consequently, Stephen wasted no time at all and gathered enough baronial support to be elected king on 22nd December 1135. He was crowned 4 days later in Westminster Abbey. All was not well in his kingdom, however. Matilda's claim to the throne was supported by another group of barons, and so an intermittent civil war broke out. Empress Matilda's husband, Count Geoffrey, was as ambitious as his wife to control England, and another even more important ally in Matilda's cause was Robert Fitzroy, Earl of Gloucester, an illegitimate son of Henry I. Initially, Robert Fitzroy had supported Stephen, but he subsequently switched to Matilda's side in the Civil War, although a premature uprising by his followers was ruthlessly crushed by Stephen in April 1138. The king's opponents were mounting up as even his brother, Henry of Blois, fell out of favor with him over who should control the See of Canterbury. Yet another enemy was Ranulph, the Earl of Chester, justifiably upset that the king had given away his castle at Carlisle to the Scottish king. Unfortunately, the king could not always buy loyalty by giving out royal lands as his predecessor. Henry I had already overused this strategy and left the crown somewhat impoverished. In addition, barons now had the leverage to promote their situations, some taking full advantage of the weakness in the monarchy to switch sides. Geoffrey de Mandeville infamously changed sides 3 times. With all these defectors and supporters of questionable loyalty around him, it perhaps understandable that Stephen may have turned a bit paranoid at this point, perhaps explaining his arrest in 1139 of Roger, Bishop of Salisbury, and 2 other bishops in the belief they were guilty of a treasonous plot. Fortunately for the king, his situation brightened somewhat when Matilda arrived in England from France and was then captured in 1139. The would-be queen was imprisoned in Arundel Castle in West Sussex. However, she was subsequently freed only to then audaciously establish a rival court in southwest England. Matilda's cause was bolstered by a rebellion on the other side of England in East Anglia against the imprisonment of the Bishop of Ely. The Earl of Chester then chose his moment to take Lincoln. The king responded by sending an army, but then lost the Battle of Lincoln on 2nd February 1141. Even worse, the king was arrested by Robert Fitzroy in April 1141 and imprisoned first at Gloucester and then at Bristol for 9 months. This was the lowest point of Stephen's reign, and at the time, it very much looked like the end of it. Empress Matilda had herself elected queen at Winchester on 8th of April 1141. She then travelled to London in June 1141 to get ready for her coronation, but the city's people found her rule to be too self-interested, and, with her irksome taxes another negative, a popular uprising drove Matilda from the city. The rebels were dealt another blow when royalists, in the form of an army of mercenaries from Flanders, led by Stephen's wife Queen Matilda, captured Robert Fitzroy. Empress Matilda was obliged to release Stephen in exchange for Robert Fitzroy's freedom on 1st November 1141. Stephen was then reinstated as king later in November in a dramatic turnaround of fortunes. Stephen even received a second coronation on 25th of December 1141, this time in Canterbury Cathedral. The Civil War was far from over, though, and would rage on for several more years yet. Unscrupulous barons took advantage of the chaos, sometimes known as the Anarchy, to seize new lands, build castles, still the ultimate medieval symbol of authority, without royal consent, and even mint their coinage, another blow to the monarchy. The life of the peasantry was made thoroughly miserable in some parts of the country, as they were caught up in battles, many sieges, the occasional burning of entire villages, and lawless barons imprisoning and torturing them without heed of the law. Even the clergy was at it, fortifying many churches and abbeys, as the level of security in certain parts of the kingdom fell to its lowest in the entire Middle Ages. The tide finally turned with two significant developments. The first happened in December 1142, when Matilda was besieged at Oxford, and she only managed to escape the castle by braving a snowstorm wrapped in a white cloak. The Empress fled to a new base at the Castle of Devizes in Wiltshire. The second development was the death of Robert Fitzroy at Bristol in 1147, who had been a crucial motivator for many rebel barons.